some more Ruby, and some more testing, and some recap. And the goal of this this session today is to make sure that we know more about Ruby as a programming language. So we're going to focus more on Ruby than on anything else today. But we will continue our journey through the ATM challenge the way I do it, and that might be a good thing for you, or not. It depends, of course, what you make out of it. But I would like this session to be more of a Q&A session if possible. So if you have any questions about Ruby as a programming language, go ahead and ask, and we can break out and do some experiments in IRB and so on. But if you don't have any questions, then I will go on and show you some Ruby tips and tricks and some JavaScript tips and tricks in the context of the ATM challenge, if that is okay. Now, yesterday what we did was to open up 2 repos, and we wrote a bit of code in both Ruby and in JavaScript, and we could see that they were remarkably alike. But don't be fooled by that, because Ruby is a completely different language than JavaScript, of course. There are similarities, but there are also big differences. And first of all, Ruby cannot be run in the browser, but nowadays JavaScript can be run on the server side, which is a good thing. But it doesn't mean that they are the same in any way. All right, we wrote a test here that is checking whether the subject matter is of a specific class. And once we parted, so let me just recap what I did once you left the stream yesterday, because what I did was to rewrite this test, and this test is the one where I check what class we are using to create our ATM subject, or our subject. And in RSpec, you can use this pretty amazing matcher that is called to be instance of. Yesterday I wrote it slightly different. I said expect subject.class to equal ATM, but now I changed this to be instance of, which is a slightly different matcher. But this matcher is actually very much alike the one that we have available to us in Mocha and in Chai. So that's a nice little change. Now, we use this word subject a lot in our tests, both in RSpec and in Mocha Chai. Could anybody tell me what is subject and why do we create that? Do we have anyone that would like to take on that challenge? What is subject and why do we use that?
Isn't subject the ATM?
In this context, definitely yes. But when you see the ATM, what is that in more exact?
Good question.
I know. Anybody else? But in principle, look, you're right. I mean, in this context, subject is an instance of the ATM class, right? The class is the blueprint for what we are doing and how our object should behave with, and it holds some data and functionality and so on. and subject is an instance. And why do we use the word subject? For instance, why don't we just say, why wouldn't I just say, like my ATM? I'm pretty free to set any name on this variable that holds the instance. Why do I use subject? Anyone? You're saying something, but you're muted, Luke.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying, no, I'm not actually sure. I kind of understand the principle of it, but I'm not sure why we use subject.
All right, and it's pretty straightforward. The reason why we use subject, because it is the subject of our test, right? We want to run our test against a specific instance, just to check whether it behaves the way we want it to behave, and therefore it's called subject. Now, the interesting part here, and really take this to you, that in RSpec, subject is created for us automatically. It's you see, I don't define it anywhere here in this particular test, and this is really important that we understand. We don't have to define subject, because RSpec is configured in the way that it automatically creates a specific instance variable for us, or instance of this class. Now, if you look at my JavaScript implementation in Mocha Chai, we actually have to define it ourselves. We have to say subject equals new ATM. That's really important. So that would be the equivalent of doing this in like, well, we could do something like this before do and then we will say something like at subject equals atm.new, and then we can't use subject as a local variable, but rather as an instance variable. So we would have to have an @ sign in the beginning on every of these instances that we want, where we want to use it, right? That would be a necessary change that we would have to do. And I can run my spec here, and we can see that they are all passing, right? But one principle that we want to live after is to write as little code as possible at all times. So what we can do is to avoid that, of course, because we can utilize the things that that RSpec is doing for us, and we don't have to set it like this at all. Do you guys know the difference between variables in Ruby that has this @ sign in the beginning versus variables that do not have the @ sign in the beginning? Has anyone stumbled upon that at some point?
Yeah, I read it recently, but I've kind of forgotten it. So
that's cool. That's right. Try to remember
it's
this.
in the documentation. Yeah,
it is. So the variables with an @ sign in the beginning in Ruby are called instance variables, and the ones that are without an @ sign, they are called local variables. And the difference is, of course, scope. Where are they available? Now, instance variables can be accessed, or they are accessible between methods, and whereas local variables have a very limited scope, and they only exist inside of a method or a function. So that's the difference, basically. Now, another way to think about the subject in RSpec, and I will focus a lot on Ruby and on RSpec right now. If we would like to create our ATM with more than just a new function, so we let's say that we want to pass in some attributes to this subject, then we would have to say something like this: atm.new, and then pass in, some attributes, for instance, basically key and value, like this. Well, I don't have to make it that big, perhaps. Key value. So if we ever have to create a more complex object than just a very basic object that is created for us with a new method, where we actually need to pass in some data into our instance, then we need to manually create the subject in RSpec as well. But in this particular case, in the case of the ATM class, we do not have any requirements for the initialize method to take any arguments. As you can clearly see, the initialize method is not taking any arguments. The funds are being hard coded to 1000, so therefore we don't have to set that. I will just, for the sake of this demo, change this and allow this guy to take one argument. So let's say that we don't want all our ATMs to always have 1000 currency units, but we will be in control of that. So we could modify the initialize function to this, and we could say that I don't know, am I frozen totally? What's going on with my network? I really hate this. I'm sorry, guys. For some reason my network is killing me. I can't really even see you guys at this point or anything else, and that is not how we can run a remote course with bad network status. Hold on a second. I'm like, okay, so could we, is somebody watching the stream? Am I frozen on the stream?
No.
Now and then.
It
but
lags
your
sometimes.
exactly, the audio lags.
The audio lags.
It
Okay.
freezes sometimes.
Yeah.
All right, and I just rebooted all the computers, and everything should be up and running, and it's the shittiest solution at this point.
Maybe both at the same time takes a lot of energy.
That shouldn't be
Or
the
do you
case.
think-
I turned off your. I'm only looking at one video at a time. So I'm gonna.
Twitch screen is very clear, and the other one is really.
Yeah. So I'm going to. Okay, you know what? Let me just. I'm gonna take a short break. I'm gonna jump out of this meet, okay? And I'm gonna join from my other computer. I'll be right back with you guys. I'm really sorry about this. Let's see if this is better.
It's all good.
See you in a second.
Yep.
This is really annoying, folks, but that's the way that cookie crumbles. Let's just jump in here. All right. Now, can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, I know it's on. It should be on. Can you hear me now on my other computer? And if I share my screen now, like this, is it of better quality or is it as bad as it was before? It's much better. Okay. And is the Twitch in the stream on Twitch, is it still working properly? For you, it's frozen. It's buffering. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna have to live with that, but stay in the stream just to stay there, and we're gonna but also watch this meet stream now and everything. We're gonna work it out. I'm gonna talk to the people that runs this office so we can get a clearer internet. But I don't know. But the thing is that both Siema and Kim is in the same office, and it seems to be working for you. But it's the streaming thing. If it's, I don't know. Anyway, we were talking about the initialize function. Now I did refactor this one to take a value, to take an argument that we store as a local variable called value. Now I spoke at length about the initialize method in my introduction to Ruby. The initialize method is a constructor, or it deals with the process of of constructing the instance of this class, right? Now, so one of the main, or the main responsibility of the initialize method is to be invoked when we create a new object and assign values to the object's attributes or instance variables. So in this case, what we did before was to say, you know, when we weren't passing in any arguments to the initialize, we just hard coded the funds to be 1000, right? Now, if I change this to this, now I have to pass in something, otherwise it will error out on me, okay? So if I now don't set this, if I comment out this code and just rely on RSpec to create the subject all by itself, this won't work. And I will show it to you just so we can see this. I'm going to run RSpec again, and you will see an error here, right? All errors. So I'm just going to run one so we don't have to look at the entire output, because it's easier to read those error messages when we only run one. It's less output on the in the terminal, and therefore it's easier for us to tag along and then see what's going on. So we can see that we got a wrong number of arguments. It was given 0 arguments, but we expected at least 1 argument. And why do we accept 1 argument? Well, because we are saying here in the initialize method that we are looking into getting at least 1 argument, the value here, okay? So that's why this is erroring out. So now we can't rely on RSpec to create our subject for us. Okay, so in order to fix this, we need to reinstate this line of code that I just gave you as an example before. We will open this one up, and we will say that subject is an instance of the ATM class with the value set to 1000. God damn it, what's going on with my computer? I fucking hate this, really. Now I'm where you were a few days ago, David. Do you remember? I feel your frustration. I feel your pain, brother. And you should feel mine too. Right. Where's my what's going on here? Let's see. Sure, I'm gonna turn off everything. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, thanks, David, thanks. I will hold that against you later on. I am always very, you know, we should always have our cameras on, but on David's requests, I will turn off mine. You can watch my fantastic avatar. That's okay. All right. So now we are creating a new instance. We say atm.new, and we are passing in value of 1000. So now our tests should pass again. Let's have a look. We're going to clear this. We're going to run this spec again, and hopefully this will pass. No, it didn't. Why? Yes, of course, because I, in the heat of the moment, added an extra equal sign. We don't need that equal sign at all. So let's run this again, and now we should be all good. Yes. Okay. So this is the proper syntax for setting your own subject. You just say subject and then ATM like this, right? It's how RSpec wants us to do this, okay? There is another syntax, and I will show you this now, because you will see this as well at some point, and that is to use the let keyword here. So we basically say let, and then as a symbol pass in subject, and then just curly brackets and ATM new, right? So that's a very similar way of doing this. It will create another local variable called subject, and now we can run this test again, and this should in principle pass, unless I've done something really weird. Hopefully not, because I'm sick and tired of doing weird shit right now. I would like, right, got value 1000. Really? Really? So that didn't fly. Yes, of course, because damn it. That's what it's supposed to be. So back the truck up, forget everything I said until now. This is the proper syntax. That's why you write tests, so you figure this shit out after when you run your tests, right? So now we know where we should be. At least I knew how to fix this, which could be a good thing for me. Right. For nil class. Why would that be a nil class? Well, let's have a look. Why would that be a nil class? We are passing these first two, and this last one is failing because of this. Let me try this, It had an ad. Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's why we pair program people, right? Thank you, Lucas. You're my wingman on this one. So I truly appreciate that. Okay, so let's run that again. Let's run the whole thing, and we should be in green state, and we are, right? So do you guys remember when I said you will see the naked truth when I fuck up? Yeah, this is a good example of that. This happens to everyone, even the best guys. So that's the way this cookie crumbles. So this syntax is one way of doing things, and this syntax is a very similar way of doing that, right? In your case, you will not deal with ATMs that can have multiple, different values. We will hard code that out, or at least in the course documentation, we're setting that hard coded to 1000. But now at least you know a little more about the subject and about how to create that subject and why we're calling this a subject in our test. And if we look at the JavaScript implementation for the same thing, we can see that our class here is always it's the same thing here. We're setting funds hard-coded to 1000, right? I could change that. Very similar to what I'm doing here. I can just pass in value here. I think, at least. We'll see. I'm pretty used to fucking up. So let's see if I now run this should in principle fail for me. So let's have a look. Let's bring up the terminal, and we will say yarn test, and we are failing because now it says it's simply not a number. It's not. It doesn't receive that 1000. So now I want to modify my test, and here when I say subject equals new ATM, I just want to pass in 1000 in there and run my specs again, and that should in principle work now, hopefully. Right. So it's a very similar refactoring that we did. We changed the behavior of the class. Now it is not given 1000 units automatically. We have to pass it in as an argument in our when we create our instance, basically. And if you look at this side by side, you can see that it's pretty much the same implementation. We go to ATM and we go to ATM in this one, and we can see that they are pretty much the same. We have a class definition, we have the initialize, it's called a constructor in JavaScript. We're passing in a value, and we're setting the instance instance variable of funds to the value that we're passing in. Now, there's another thing that I want you to focus on that you might have stumbled upon earlier, and that you will definitely stumble upon moving forward, and that is this keyword here and this @ sign that symbolizes pretty much this thing, the self, if I'm not totally wrong. Self is the same thing as this, kind of, in JavaScript. Self represents the instance, and if I'm on a thin ice here actually, because I've been taught to use the instance variables with the @ sign, which you can also use self, and let me see if that is actually the case, because the best way for me to check this is to run my tests, because if self and the @ sign are two different things, then my tests should fail, and they perhaps are not, so they are passing. So self and @ is the same thing in this context. It's the instance of the class. Now I'm going to use auto formatting on my Ruby code, and that is using a gem called Solar Graph, which is a gem that you should remember and install it and use it in your VS Code. And if I do that, oh, sorry, that was not how you do it. It's like this. It at some points, well, it always adds this frozen string literal true. We don't have to dwell on what that is. Do not remove that if it appears in your formatted code. But quite often this self keyword is being removed by Ruby automatically, but not always. It depends a little bit on the linter and on the formatter. But this is the proper way to assign those values initially when you create an object. So we're good to go, and we are passing in things into our constructor. But if you look at this now, the way we use it in both Ruby and in JavaScript, we are passing this in as a value like this, just a simple argument, 1000. And to me, that is something that we refer to as a magic number. Nobody knows what it is. You're passing it in, but if somebody reads this code, you can't really make out what is 1000. You understand? It's just a random number, and we often call them magic numbers. So they just appear in code. They have a meaning, but it's not that easy to see what is it that they actually mean. Now, there is a better way to do this from a programmatic perspective, and that is to say actually what I was trying to do. I got a little ahead of myself, and to say this, like initial funds, for instance, right? And just passing 1000. Then we're putting 1000 into a context. You understand? We are telling whoever is reading this code that the value 1000 is no longer data, but it's also information, because it's in context. I think I had this distinction. I talked about this distinction with you. The difference between data and information lies in data being put in a context. And here it's an ATM, It's a new ATM, and we are setting initial funds to 1,000, right? So we need to change our implementation, because now this thing that will be passed in should be abbreviated in because it's an object now. It's no longer a single value, right? So we will call this ATT ATTR. It stands for attributes, right? You can call it, you know, like this if you want. It doesn't really matter. And then the self funds should be attributes dot initial funds, because that's what we are passing in. And now this actually makes sense. So self funds is, you know, the attributes passed in and the initial funds in there. You understand? So we should be okay. And we always keep on running our tests when we, you know, make any changes, and we are not okay because it's a hash initial funds, right? Of course, mea culpa. Again, I forgot that I was in Ruby. This is actually a hash, so we need to do this instead, right? We can't use the dot notation in Ruby out of the box. So hopefully now this will work. And now it does, right? Because again, it's a hash, and so we have to access that as a hash value. And a hash values are always in hard brackets and then symbolized. Now, there is also this notation for hashes, but this it might or might not work. It depends a little bit. It depends a little bit on Ruby version, I think. And it didn't now because it can't access that. So hash keys are symbolized, so they are passed in as symbols. In older versions of Ruby, they were passed in as strings, but we don't do that. I think that potentially what I could do is to change this to a string potential, but I don't see a reason to do that. But let's see if this would work. Let's make this a little bigger. No, it doesn't work. No, so that's not how we want to do this. We want to pass this in. Where's my? Forget about this. No, there it is. Right. So we want to add this as a symbol. And do you guys remember? You know, we spoke about data types. What is the difference between a symbol and a string? Apart from the obvious that it starts with a colon in the beginning. It does. It does. And the symbol is a string, but it's a simpler form of a string. It's an immutable string. You can't change it. There are plenty of things you can do to a string, whereas symbols are much simpler. They take up less space, of course, as Luke said, but they are also immutable. They cannot be changed anymore. Whereas a string can be transformed. You can do plenty of things with a string. Upcase it, reverse it. You can break it up in characters, count characters, and change them, and so on. So strings are much simpler. Now we can do the same thing that we did here to avoid magic numbers in our JavaScript implementation. So in this case, we were going to call this options, which is more of a JavaScripty best practice, I think. And here we can say options dot initial funds. And I'm using camel case here because camel case is used in JavaScript more extensively than snake case. So here I would say I have to pass in an object like this, and I would say initial funds 1000, like this. And this is also placing things into a context. We say if initial funds is 1000, and now in principle we should be okay. Yes, we are okay on this one. Now you see that I am passing in an object here as an argument. To be honest, I'm doing the same thing in Ruby, but I just don't have to spell it out. You see, I don't have any curly brackets in here. I can have them like this, but I don't have to have them. And therefore, when I format my code, you see, my code format removes those curly brackets because I don't need them. See, it's gone now. But if I would run my tests with those curlies in place, we should still go green. Yes, we're all good. Just so you understand that sometimes when you switch languages like I do in this demo, you forget about this, and you forget about the casing and all of that stuff. But in Ruby, you can often omit parentheses and curly brackets. So for instance, what I could do in principle is to simplify this even further, and I could remove, I think I can remove those parentheses. I can say ATM new space and then initial funds and so on. I am pretty convinced that this will work. I will eat my hat. I don't wear a hat. I have a hat actually. If it doesn't, it does. It does, right? So we can. So in this aspect, Ruby is programmer friendly. You can omit certain things, and that is called poetry mode for some reason. It's not very poetic, but that's what we refer to this to. It's poetry mode. Now, if I would like to, chain any other method on top of this, like have a dot and then something, whatever that would be, then I need those parentheses. But if I'm not chaining any functionality on that new action, then I don't have to have that. Now, for me personally, I usually have those parentheses because they kind of wrap, they make me focus on what's actually being passed in visually when I read code. But again, the interpreter, the Ruby runner, doesn't really care about that at all. Okay, that's that. I'm going to remove this. Now, the things we did here that I would like to focus, and I'm moving out from the scope of the course documentation. Now, another magic number that I see here is this withdraw method, like this $50 or 50 units that I want to withdraw. Later on, if you look at your own Ruby code, because you guys moved ahead in this implementation, you see probably stuff like, me passing in like a pin code, and then as a third argument the account, right? Have you seen that at some point moving forward, right? And the reason why I'm saying this now, because at this stage, when you do something like this, you have, ATM.withdraw or subject.withdraw, and you pass in 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an account object. It looks like a fucking mess to me, right? It doesn't really explain what it is. There is just some random shit being passed in. And even if it works, it depends, of course, how you write your code and so on. That's perfectly fine, but it doesn't feel that intuitive. It doesn't feel good to do this. What I would like to do is to pass in something like this, right? Like amount, and then a comma, and then a provided pin code, right? And then perhaps just account, right? or user account or something like that. Give it some sort of a name, right? Because now it actually starts to make more sense what kind of data we are passing in. Does that make sense to you guys? Right. We do not cover that in the course materials, but I think that would be a good refactoring actually to take a look at. And so that would mean that, of course, at this stage I don't have this yet, so that is irrelevant, right? So this would have to be the case, and this will fail for me now. So if I run the guy on line 16, and then this one will fail, right? Because it can't, hash cannot be changed into an integer, so you get that error, and that is of course because we didn't change the implementation. So in the withdraw method, I would have to say, I will call this, attributes, for instance, or or options or whatever, and then I would say at and then amount. That's what I want. Well, that's what I want to withdraw. So now this will pass for me, hopefully. Yeah, sure. Right, it is passing. Once again, so we see everything on screen. We're all good to go, right? Okay. And this way of critically thinking or looking at your code is really important. Like, I want to be able to read my tests and read my implementation code and make sure that if I wasn't myself, that if I would be somebody else reading this code, they should be able to understand what this code actually does. And for you, when you are new at this, you have to look a little past the dots and the parentheses and the curly brackets and what have you, and just read out what for instance, line 17 says. If we know what subject is, which is an instance of the class, we want to withdraw 50 units of currency from that ATM. And it becomes, if you're smart about your naming conventions, it becomes a little more like English, and it could be fairly readable. Would you agree with that? Right. Okay. Now, big topic, guys. Big topic. First, let me just do the same refactoring here, just so we are doing the same thing in both. So we did this initial funds. So here we want to pass in an object, and we want to say amount, and that would be 50, and that should fail for us now. And the error message is more cryptic here because we just get not a number. It's not the same clarity in this error message that we get from RSpec, but it's still an error message. And here we would just have to change our ATM.js to say options, and then we'll just say options dot amount. Here we can use the dot notation. Okay, guys. So we're gonna run this spec again, and we are good to go. But in JavaScript, you can also do this. You can do hard brackets and wrap this in quotes so it becomes a string. This is exactly the same thing as the dot notation. So this should pass for me right now as well. Yeah, we're all good, right? So just so you know that this is more of a hash-like thing, but again, in Ruby we need to use symbols nowadays, not strings, but it resembles the hash. And objects in JavaScript are pretty much what hashes are in Ruby. Not exactly the same thing, but very much. In Java, I think they're called dictionaries, and every programming language has them in one form or another. But it's pretty much the same thing. All right, but The problem with this ATM class is that this ATM needs to interact with another class, which is the account, right? Because the ATM needs to know about some attributes of the account class, or an instance of an account class, because it needs to know the PIN code, and it also needs to know about the balance. We need to be able to make sure that the user that wants to withdraw some money actually has some money on the account for him to withdraw, right? And here comes the problem, because we are in development. We just started to create this ATM piece of software, and we do not have an account. We don't even have an account class yet created. Yet we want to interact with that. So that's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? We could leave the ATM for now, for a second, create an account class, run some tests on it, whether it belongs to a person, it has a balance, and it has all of that, right? That's one way to go about this. But that's work undone if we follow the principles, because when we return back to our ATM test, we would like to use this account for something. But the unit testing principles dictates that unit testing should be done in total isolation. It shouldn't be dependent on anything out from the outside world, right? So even if we had an account class, we shouldn't pull that in and use it in our testing of the ATM, because it breaks our principle. And then you guys say to us, fuck principles, right? I'm the first one to say that. Who gives a shit, right? But we want to learn things in a good standard. So we have to obey these principles, at least in the beginning, because it is actually more important than what meets the eye. It will become a problem if you go down that route, that you start to pull in real objects. Then you'll be pretty fucked later on in life. So we don't want to do that, okay? And I'm trying to explain this with as few words as possible, so you guys don't fall asleep. But there is a solution to all of this. We do not need real objects in order to test functionality of a class that the class that we are currently working with requires. We can use fake objects. We can pretend that we have an object, okay? And what we do use in RSpec is called a double. It's like a stand-in. And some of you have probably reached that section in your course documentation. You've seen that we use doubles, class doubles, or instance doubles. And I always mix them up, so don't worry about mixing them up. But a double is a good thing. So in Ruby and in RSpec, we have doubles that we can use. In JavaScript, we don't really have them in the same way that we have them in RSpec. But we do have something that we refer to as mocks or stubs or spies. So we're going to make use of that. And for that, we need to remember that we need to have another library installed on our computer and in our project, and that library is called sign-on. Okay, so we'll get to sign-on in just a second, but for now we're going to focus on the Ruby part. And our course documentation tells us, I think I have it up here somewhere. I think I need a refresher on this because I rarely use this. Where's my course documentation? Should be here somewhere, right? Yeah. No? Yeah, here. Right. So we have a section about the instance double. And it's a great section, but it only scratches the surface. But if we need an account class because we want to make this check whether our fake user actually has some money in his account. Then we can do this let account, and you've seen this syntax already when I showed you how we can create subject in different ways. So we can set let an account that will create a local variable would be an instance double of an account class. And it doesn't really matter if the account class exists or not, if it has been defined or not defined. It will just assume that, hey, this guy wants to use a fake class that is called account. And then we can stub out certain methods on that fake double. We can say allow the account that we just created up here to receive a call to a method called balance and return 100. That is the getter method. Remember, I spoke at length about setter and getter methods. So we just allow this fake object to not respond with an error, but rather, yeah, sure, you ask for a balance, I give you 100. And then we also allow this one, or we also stub out the setter method, which means that if we say allow account to receive balance equal, it will not render an error, but rather accept that whatever value we are passing in. And it doesn't really matter what happens to that value in this particular context, because we are unit testing the ATM class. The only thing we are looking for is that we have this object, and whenever we invoke this object or query this object for a balance, it actually returns something and it doesn't return an error for us, right? So if we just take a look at this and we write a test here, is to say we're gonna write a test in Ruby saying that it is expected to reject a withdrawal attempt if there are no funds on the account, right? It's expected to reject a withdrawal attempt if there are no funds on the account. So you want to withdraw 200 units and you only have 100 on your account. That shouldn't fly. That's a pretty reasonable scenario for an ATM machine, isn't it? Okay, so we will now say we will create this account first, and we set all the variables up here on top of the test. So we're going to say let account, and that would be instance double, and that will be of an account class. Account, right? And now and at this point we need to be very, very careful, right? Because we need to let our implementation code know about the account, right? We need to be able to pass this in to our ATM. And if we do that now, we're going to have to modify the withdraw method to actually, make use of that account. So now I want to say subject withdraw. Withdraw, and again I'm gonna pass in amount, and I'm gonna say 200 now in this particular test case, but now I need to pass in this account, right? And I will pass in account, and then I will say something like expect well, I could do this message or respond. Yeah, let's call it message equals this, and I will say expect message to equal, and then an object, and I will say, I don't know, status error, and then message you can't do, no, you can't you can't can, and then I got to escape this, can't do this, do that. You have no cache or whatever. You can't do that. Okay, so we want this to work for us. And note that I'm using the withdraw method in this test here above, not the one that I just wrote, but I'm also using it above here. And I don't care about this test at this point. I really don't care about this one. The only thing I care about is whether this one is passing or not. And if I don't care about this one, or this one, or this one, then I shouldn't be running them, right? Okay, so I only want to run this. And so I've showed you this before. Does anyone know how can I run only this particular test? Anyone? No? Right. So what I do is to say rspec. Shit. No, okay. There we go. What the fuck? Come on, give me a break. There we go. That's in JavaScript. That's in JavaScript. Here we do rspec, right? And then we know that we're in the spec folder, right? ATM spec. And then I just back up one line. I say colon, and then the line of code. And does anybody remember what line of code it was? It's 22. Right. And we have a syntax error. We have a syntax error. Lots of output, people. Panic mode, instant. Okay, let's see. It's just a syntax error. It's not a problem. You can't do that. To equal status. And first of all, this is misspelled, but that's not the error. You can't do that. Why is that an error? Is this because of that? Is of the escape? No, come on, give me a break. This can't be that. It is. No, it's not that. Status error to equal expect message to equal what? The fuck? What? What are you complaining about? Really? What did I do wrong now? Account. Oh gosh, I'm doing something weird here. Right, he got 800 now. So what's wrong with this object? Status error. Yeah. Here, you mean this? Yeah. I can't see that. No, it's okay. Right. Status error. Right. I don't know. Let's see. I'm puzzled. So binding pry is a debugger. Oh, you don't have that, so I need to require pry. No, require. That's how you do it. You require pry. Right. What? Are you? Oh, yes. Right. Okay. Let's have a look. What's going on here? What's the deal? What's the deal? gem file with rspec pry. I don't have any ambiguous. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Available instance of this dflc. Right. Oh gosh, gem clean up. No, perhaps I can't. Let's. Yeah, let's. Yeah. It was what Arun said about this space, which is weird as hell. You know, that shouldn't be a problem. Because I got a different error message now. You understand? And now I get this because I need to go to 23 now, not 22, because I included the pry, and I need this. Right. Yeah. So message is 800, right? And this is not a problem. Like, hash equals this, and I'm gonna add this space here. Right, there's no problem with this one. I don't really. So this one is 800 now because we actually withdrew this because we're not using this for anything, right? So that's why this is failing. But now it's giving me wrong number of arguments. What the hell? ATM spec given 0 expected 1 message on 26. What the fuck are you talking about? I really don't understand. And now he has an error thing. Yes, stretch, people. It's always good to stretch. It's always good to stretch. We have 28 minutes to solve this mystery, and then we're off, people. 28 minutes. We will prevail. What's wrong with me? Why am I doing this? First of all, let's focus on fixing this first, right? You mean like this? No, but because then it's, well, perhaps I can. We'll try. Hold on, let me just try this first. I was not prepared for this kind of errors. So quit. Right. So we couldn't use curlies. Right. That's you mean with curly brackets? Include is for arrays, I think, but I'm not sure. I want to go into poetry mode again, so let's just run this once. It should be an error, but I was just getting a weird error message before. Expected 800 to include status. So, but it doesn't respond to include. It's going to be an object, so I don't think include is actually going to work on this one. But I am failing, and I'm failing for a fairly good reason now. So I'm gonna change this back to EQ, and I'm gonna remove this bracket. So I'm gonna go into this poetry mode thing without the brackets again. But I'm just confused why it wouldn't take an object for me, or a hash. Right. No, okay. I have a good error message. Okay, so we are not responding with this. So now we want to this should fail. I mean, I haven't written any implementation code yet, so this should fail for me. Okay, so let's go to the ATM RB, go to the withdraw thing, and we are having the attributes. Now we also have the account, right? So we can say if well, first of all, we can say something like this: account equals at account, right? And then if account balance is greater than, is this the greater than, smaller than, yeah, if it's smaller than the amount, which I probably need to intermediate is store in a variable instead because it's more readable, right? Amount to withdraw, then we do this, else we return this hash, no, this what was it? It was this. You can't do that, right? But now we want this to be on. Now we need to wrap this in curlies, right? Because we're making a check here. You understand? We are checking whether this account actually holds the amount of money. Yeah, thanks. No, there we go. Good spot. Thank you. Okay, so now we want to run this again. We want to run the same test, only the one on 23. And I'm saying this now when you guys are saying, oh, what the fuck is he talking about? Well, but it's really important. You can't run the entire test suite when you are working with this kind of changes, because these changes are too big for the rest of your test to be run. They will fail, you understand? And it will just confuse the shit out of you. You need to get into the habit of running one test only, and one test only when you do refactorings like this. It's really, really important. And I would say this now, you will forget about this, and you will ask me into a session or look us into a session, and you will keep on running your entire test suite, and we will be bitching about this. Why are you doing this? You're wasting my time, wasting your own time, and all of this stuff. Are we clear on this? That I have said this now and emphasized this really thoroughly. Don't do that. Right, Lucas? I'm right, right? Yes, I am. Right. Right. And now we run this and we get an error message. And look at this. It says instance double account received unexpected message balance with no arguments, you know, because we have this instance double. It is programmed by default to give you an error, a fairly nice message if you're trying to use or invoke a method on this double that doesn't exist. So we had a solution to this because it says in our course documentation, allow the account to receive balance and return 100. Okay, we're trying to withdraw 200, we're gonna just allow him to receive 100. So we can say in our test suite here, before we actually do anything else, so we say allow account, oh sorry, to receive, what was it? I give it to receive balance, right? What? Receive balance and return 100. But and return was in, all right, in the with right, exactly. There we go, right? There we go. Right? Better? Yes. Okay. So now we can comment this guy out, and we're gonna run this back again. and I have a logical error here, of course. It's the other way around, right? Yeah, of course. This, right? Right. Okay. So now we're making a proper check. And a takeaway from this, right? Few things that are really important. Gentlemen, if you think that this is complex, then you really need to take a deep breath and get your SHIT together, because this is complex-ish, but things will get much worse, right? And it's also not only about testing and complexity in your tests. You need to be able to comprehend these kind of things, because it's really, really important that you do. We need to be able to work iteratively and figure out stuff, work with things one way or another, and so on, right? So it's really, really important. Now there is another aspect of the whole thing that I need you to consider, and we will not necessarily write this up now, but you see, if there is enough money on the account, we are today at this point on line 14 decreasing the amount of money in the ATM machine, but we also, of course, need to send a signal to the account and say, now you have to lower your own balance with the same amount of money, right? Because at the end of the day, if that wouldn't be happening, everyone would be happy, right? We go to the ATM machines and just withdraw shitloads of money, and our accounts will stay the same. That's what's happening now in our implementation. Now, we don't want that. Well, perhaps as individuals we do, but like ATM operators, we probably don't. So we would say something like account balance is minus equal the amount, right? Because we lower that as well. Okay? Okay. Now our test will fuck up again because we are using a double, right? So there is no setter on that account double. Well, apparently there was. Oh, that's oh, fuck you, really? The fuck? That ruined my entire script now, didn't it? Oh, fuck. Yeah, well, that's a false. Yeah, yeah, but the thing is that, is it my responsibility at this point to do that? It is not, because we're using unit testing the ATM class. I don't really care about the account class yet. So this is actually, a blessing in disguise, because this is premature optimization. I am writing code that I don't really need to write at this point. I would probably wait with that, but it tips me off balance that this actually is passing. This one should render an error. So what if I just do this old style thing? Because this is what I want to do. Account balance equals the account balance minus the amount. This shouldn't be passing, but it is passing. So this is definitely a false positive at this stage, so apparently this thing that you have down below here, allow account to receive balance equal, doesn't really apply. So you don't have to apply that in your own implementations. That was a bit weird that it actually passed. Let me do one test here. Require pry here, and then I should just do binding pry here, and I'm going to run the test again. And really, oh, damn it, folks. Ugh, there is no false positives. It's just me being stupid. Of course, of course. I'm never hitting this. I never hit this because we are testing for the error message. Do you understand? I never hit this. So if in order to hit this if statement, you know, be inside of this if statement, I have to run another spec. I have to run not this one. Sorry, not this one. Let's remove this. Not this one, but rather this one that actually, you know, is actually performing this thing, right? So here I'm gonna say, oh fuck. So I want to say, you know, he has 100 and he wants to receive 50, right? Then I will be in that particular if block, in the particular if statement inside of that, right? So let's run this one on 18. You see how easy it is to get lost? Fuck it. So we want to run the one on 18, not 23. And we should be in the if thingy, right? And now we do, you know, self funds, and that we are already past this. You see, we are past line 14. We put the debugger on line 15, and we haven't executed line 16 yet. Do you understand? That's why we put the breakpoint there. So self funds should be already 950 because we already got that. And if we say account balance, that should be oh fuck. 100, right? And so this one will fail for me now because there is no setter. So if I do quit here, we will say instance double received unexpected message balance equal with 50. You can't do that, right? So now we actually need to say allow account to receive and then balance equal. That's it. We don't have to have it return anything to us. And so now if I run this test, we should be good now. Right, so now if I quit, yeah, I'm not getting an error anymore because we just programmatically told this fake object, hey, whatever we say, just go along, play along with it. You understand? But this thing here that we're doing now, we're using a fake object, but when it comes to actually creating this account class, we've already, you know, used it when it didn't exist, so it will be much easier for us to actually create it later because we already know quite a bit about its behavior. At least we know that it should have an attribute accessor balance, so we can get the setter and the getter method automatically. Do you understand? So that's a good thing. So it forces us to think already now about things that we will do in the future without us actually having to do them. We can stub things out and in our test use this kind of syntax. Now in JavaScript we don't have that, right? We have a different mechanism for this. Okay, so I will just show you because I won't code this up now because we're running a little low on time, and I want to do a Q&A session. But let's see if I have GitHub Craft Academy. Right, no, it's on my own account actually. So on the repos, we could go to JS ATM. Right, so let's have a look at this one. And in specs, Right. You see, this one is a little bit. It's more. We're doing much more than that we do today, but I am creating an account here, and which is just a simple object, and I say pin null in the beginning, and then balance is also null, right? There are no values in that object, and then I'm using sign on to create a sandbox for various reasons. Don't worry about why, but I'm saying sandbox stub the account object, which is here, and we set pin to value 1234. And this is an example of stubbing of a property or attribute value in JavaScript. And then we also stub the account balance to be 200. And then we do the same thing that you already saw me do with creating the new ATM and so on. And then after each test, we are restoring the sandbox, which means that the account is again null value on pin and null value on the balance, right? So we can do something like subject withdraw 50, we pass in the account, and we pass in the correct pin code, which I also created somewhere here, right? 1234, and that is as close as to the to a double that we can come in this context. There are some other ways to do this that are a little more complicated, but Mocha and Chai is not as intuitive and not as programmer friendly as RSpec, but we can achieve the same result. And that is the reason why I'm showing you this is not because you have to memorize that you can, but I want you to understand the concept that when you unit test a specific class, you don't want this class to interact with real object. You want objects outside of the class. You want to use fake objects so that we can truly say that these are unit tests done in isolation. If you would actually use real objects and perform, all this withdrawal and deposit, we will work with deposits and all of this stuff, then we don't call them unit specs anymore. They are called integration tests when you integrate different parts of your application into a single spec file. And they have quite a lot of value, and we will write integration specs, perhaps even in this ATM challenge. But at this stage, we are practicing writing unit tests, so therefore we need to keep certain things in mind. Right. Right. I think that pretty much cuts it for me. Lucas, did I miss anything? What? Did I just hang up? Damn it. Right. I just happened to hang up on my students. So, and I don't have the link for the meeting anymore. So I probably need somebody to send me the link. Right. So we got Lucas to send me that. That was weird. That was weird. Okay, I just hang up on myself. Yeah. Well, here I'm back. Right. Yes, it was a lot. David, I heard you speak, so you're gonna do the first round of comments. Where are you on this one?
I have a lot to.
Yes. Yes. A lot of code to write and a lot of things to cover. Did I lose you anywhere? Okay. All right. Sure thing. Let's see if we move over to Kim, your thoughts.
But it's good with
Mm-hmm.
symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Like the what's the name again of the numbers? Like the data. That's not the infinite. Something.
Yes. Let's see. What was the question again, Kim? The symbols, you mean? The symbols, you mean, or the magic numbers? Yes, the magic numbers. Yes. Yeah, yeah. We try to avoid magic numbers. Good stuff. All right. Luke, where did I lose you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's that's why I'm doing all of these demos to show you more than just the course documentation shows you. Um, you know, the course documentation is a working software, but our agile principles is not only to create working software, but also try to craft it as well as possible. And I'm not saying that all these solutions that I presented today leads to a perfect solution, because as usual there are multiple ways to do things. So but yeah, you know, it is what it is, and the complexity lies in you know, if you stress through this, if you know, then of course it would be very cumbersome and tiring. But if you just work your way through one line of the code, one it block, one method, then it is pretty cool, you know. Seva, your thoughts? Still muted. Still we can't. I can't hear him. No, 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 nothing. Oh, that one we can. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Mm. It is. It sure is. Absolutely. Arun, your thoughts? Cool. Yes, there are many things. Absolutely. You guys are returning to that. That goes without saying. It is a boot camp. Welcome to reality. Now, again, I just want to reiterate that you will always see me do mistakes and errors. That comes with the territory, and see them for what they are, an opportunity to learn more how to fix things, and observe my way back. It's not how, again, it's not if you fall down, it's how fast you get up again. And from what I hear, you guys are falling down a little bit as well, so it's I'm not alone to making mistakes or running into issues. So I think it's good practice for you to see me unfuck myself from time to time. So hopefully that's a learning experience. Christer, your thoughts? Like everyone said, yeah. That's good. That's the spirit. That's the spirit. Right. Awesome, guys. But but what are you saying, guys? That the course documentation actually tests? Oh, you mean like running one single test at a time? You mean? Oh, okay. All right. No, because you used the expression we didn't unit test. I mean, what you meant to say is we didn't run one test at a time. Okay, now I understand. Because we're unit test. Okay, I got you. No, but try to do that. Of course, it's definitely important to run them one at a time, because it is better for you. And again, go ahead, Luke. Okay. We don't really have time to go through the whole thing, but I can just say this: in your gem file, you want to include this gem that is called pry, right? You bundle up after that, and then you can just require this file in your. You can require it on many locations, but what I did today was to require pry inside of my spec or inside of my implementation code, wherever I want to use it, like this, and then I use this expression wherever I want to halt the execution. I just say binding dot pry. That's what I can do. Yeah, and that will actually stop the execution like I did here on that particular line of code. I'm not sharing. Right. Right, because I was thrown out. Yeah. So anyway, back to the sharing thing. So I require pry here in my implementation file, for instance, and then I can set this keyword like I do on line 15, and also start to talk in line numbers. It's really important. It's extremely important. So on line 15, I add this binding dot pry, and then when I execute my code, run my specs, for instance, or use it, then this execution will halt on that particular line, and the next line will not be executed for now. And that's a very brief intro to pry and debuggers. There are so many more things I can tell you about that, but that will come in a different session. But basically, in your gem file, you need to add gem pry, and you have to run bundle to install that dependency. That's the important thing. Right on, folks. Right on. There is a whole demo on pry. Yeah, definitely. because it's a really, really, really important thing. And I'm glad that you asked, because I'm confident that you will at least try to use it. And let me tell you this, the sooner you guys get into the habit of using debuggers, whether it's in Ruby or in JavaScript, the better it is for you. Debuggers are extremely important in all form of development, whether it's backend or front end and what have you, right? So try to do that. With a slight headache, people, and after a series of small setbacks, we can safely say that we managed to go through this, and we learned a few new things, hopefully. Now, I know that there's a lot, and there, if I can ask for something, is that, you know, I know that it's a lot, so you don't have to say that to me, because, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've met a few hundred students now, and it's always a lot. So we can just say that silently. Now moving on, but one thing, you know, we do send these recordings out to you, whether to your email inboxes or YouTube clips. You can watch them. That's perfectly fine, and you should actually do that. But the more important thing is that you need to try these things out, right? You need to experiment. So you see, I am moving outside of the course documentation now. Do the bare minimum, which is the course docs, right? But also try to halt the execution somewhere, get a feel for what's going on, move some things. If the tests are passing too quickly, on your first attempt, then break them. Again, we're in digital domain, so you can change the 50 to 500 or 5,000 when you want to withdraw something. You want to see the test fail at some point, and then you want to switch back to a value that you had before, and then you want to see it pass again, because then you know that it actually does something. Do you understand? If it just passes, then how fun is that? Break shit. That's the rebel way of doing things, right? Have a great afternoon, people. I'm done. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. And thank you very much for anyone who has been watching the stream or will watch the recording. We love you all. Cheers.